Welcome, everyone. I am so happy to be here tonight, and I hope you all. We're going to give you a few minutes for everybody to come into this live interview because I have a guest who I think all of you are going to want to listen to tonight. I have with us Bronwyn Jane, who is on our call from Australia right now. And I am so excited to have her come into this group because she works with children and parents who have psychic children. And she talks about how we can support those children as they're growing up. So I would first of all like to just introduce Bronwyn to our Dancing Jaguar community and have her tell us a little bit about herself and how she ended up doing this really important work with children and families. So Bronwyn, welcome.
Hi. So I am a psychic medium, and as a psychic medium, I've been that forever. And so I have a lot of experiences from when I was a child myself being a medium and connecting with the spirit world and not truly understanding what it was, not truly understanding that not everyone did it, not everyone expressed it. And I grew up in rural Australia, which has a very strong faith base. And so I was in a family that this was challenging for them to be able to appreciate. It actually, who I was and how I showed up really pushed their belief system. And as a child, I was told to stop talking to my grandfather that had passed away, to stop sharing my experiences as a child with connecting with the spirit world. And through that process of being told to stop and to be something other than what I was, it changed my trajectory in life and changed who I was and created a lot of issues as I grew up, because what I was told at 7 years old in those words from my mother was, don't be you. And that being me scares people, because that's what I was told. And so I took that as I grew, and I was like, well, I can't show up as me. I have to show up what people want me to be. And so it changed who I was. And it made a lot of challenges as a teenager as I grew, even though I had all these experiences still and I used them. I just couldn't tell anyone. And then I became a mother in my 30s. And what I realized was that I was gifted a child that was like me. And so I made a conscious choice as a parent to treat him differently than what I was, to parent him with a really open mind so he could be himself the whole way through childhood. I didn't want him to have to work on some of the challenges that I had to as I grew to find himself again and to find his way back to himself. And so it took me on a journey. It was almost like a quest, it felt like at the time. It was like a quest for knowledge. What is this? Because where I grew up, I didn't understand what I was. I'd never heard the word medium. I didn't know it was a thing, didn't know there were psychics, didn't know any of this stuff existed. So when I arrived in the city, I realized that there was people like me. I'd never encountered it before. And that's where the quest began. And I sought a lot of knowledge to consciously parent my child. So I really had to understand myself, understand the experiences, and then integrate them so I could support and help him. And that's where it all began. And it was a lot.
And it sounds like even as you were learning how to parent your child, you were learning how to reparent yourself.
Yeah.
Because so much of who you were at the time had been, suppressed and not allowed to be fully authentic. So it must have been a journey, a dual journey for you, one in learning how to reparent that part of you that had to shut down in order to survive while you were parenting your son. That must have been an amazing journey.
It was. It was far more than what I realized when I started, far more than what I realized it was going to be. But it was so magnificent. It wasn't easy, that's for sure. but things that are magnificent generally aren't easy. So it was finding myself, understanding myself, so I could really make sure that this soul that I was blessed with got to be his full self, all that he is, and he is magnificent, but not easy, but magnificent. So I could do that. And his journey has been very challenging, because it was like they amped it up for him. So I know that everything that he went through was so I could take that as the starting path for what I'm doing, so I could share it with others. Because compared to what I experienced, my experience was what I would say quite standard as a medium. Everything was lovely. I connected with people I knew, people in my family. So it was really lovely. He signed up for something that was far more, but it gave me the blessing.
Would you be willing to share a little bit about what his
sure.
journey has been like compared to yours?
Yeah, so as I said, mine was quite, I call it standard, full of love, connecting with people within my family, ancestors, or people that I knew. His was not. His was spirits that we did know that were from our family initially when he was very small, but then when he got to the ages of sort of 10 and above, so 10 to 15 in that age group, he was challenged. So we had a lot of spirits that we didn't know, and understanding why they come close, what they share, how it shows up, how we know they're around, and also those energies and entities that are a little bit on the lower frequency level, and understanding how to control that, manage that, work our way through that. And it was intense for him. But I know he agreed to it.
That is true. That must be so interesting as a parent to know that your child signed up for this, and at the same time, watching your child struggle with such a challenge.
And allowing, and if I'll just share an example, if I can.
I'd love to
Which
hear.
on the surface may seem daunting, but so I will pre-frame it that way. It may seem daunting, but I had made a conscious choice that I was never going to make any of his experiences more than what they were. And I was always going to go with an open heart. So one day he was about 9 years old, and he was in the yard. And I went to see what he was doing, and he had taken some of his father's tools, and he had created out of wood a upside down U shape. He'd taped them all together, and I actually was impressed with how ingenious he was in this regard. And then he had taken a skipping rope and looped it over the top of the piece of wood and sticky taped a ruler at the bottom of it, so a long piece of plastic. And he was laying on the ground, and this was above him. And I came out to him, and I was like, and I never judged. That was the one thing that I always do. It's like, I'm never going to judge. I'm never going to assume. And I've used that the whole way through. And I said to him, what are you doing? And he pointed over to the left, and he said, that lady. And I could see that there was a spirit lady there that I didn't recognize. He said, that lady told me this is how she died. And he created a guillotine.
Oh my goodness.
So on the surface, very shocking. But I didn't want to make it a big thing. That was always my approach, that I would make it normal. And so I said to him, that is fabulous, right? That you understand that. Lady, you need to go because we don't know you. I said, pack up the things before Dad comes home because he wants his tools in the shed. And that was it.
Just very matter of fact.
Yes, always matter of fact. We had lots of experiences like this. And it was always keep it normal. Don't make it a big deal. Just like any other thing.
And may I ask how old he is now?
21.
21. And does he have, in your opinion, like a full grasp of this, or does he still need to be coming back to you to understand how to handle certain situations, or have you help him interpret anything?
Then this is where I say he's amazing. He has a full grasp. He is, because we have parented and the whole way through his life with this is normal and understanding and sharing knowledge with every single experience, we've unpacked it. Now, as a 21-year-old, he has an awareness and a knowledge that you would normally expect from a philosopher that teaches at university in all scopes of historic things, religion. It's amazing what he knows. And the connection that he has beyond this world is astonishing. He teaches me every day.
Wow,
Yeah.
amazing.
So
So I
yeah,
well, it sounds like you did an amazing job raising your son. So he learned how to really trust what his experiences were, and his journey through learning how to manage what was happening. Um, it sounds like you did an amazing job of really helping him trust that it was okay to be who he is.
yeah, I'm not perfect.
Oh, yeah.
Not by any stretch of the imagination. And yes, but we still have energetic challenges, even now. As a highly sensitive person, and even when he was younger, those challenges still come up, and we still need to revisit and remember that some of the energy that we feel is not ours.
Mhm.
Because it can be overwhelming when you're so sensitive. So we still have sometimes to remember that, and we still have to sometimes remember go back to our basics, go back to our basic principles of what we learned when we were younger, and the tools that he had then. Because life is, even at 21, and even though he understands all this and he has a knowledge that blows my mind what he knows, he still has to go through the human experience, and he still needs to stay grounded and all these type of things so he can function and have that whole normal life that you would want for a 21-year-old. It's not easy.
Yeah, I can imagine. I would love to talk to you about what happens when a parent realizes that their child is really sensitive or psychic or both, and they know they need to seek help. How, if I have parents that come to me and I know that they need some extra support, I would love to refer people to you. And I would also love to have you share with us what that process looks like when a parent knows they're dealing with something that they don't know how to handle and they need some expert advice and suggestions.
A couple of things that I will sometimes the signs that we're dealing with something a little bit different may not even be totally obvious. Sometimes they are really obvious because we have imaginary friends, we see it in play, they know things they shouldn't know in regards to family events, historic events, things like this. But sometimes too, there's other signs that can be miscategorized that are very common for psychic children. And that will be their attention span, the way that their eye contact with people. What happens physically, they're very sensitive with digestion, food, reflux occurs. There's a lot of other things that can also be your cross-check. So when we know that we've got all these type of identifiers, and it's like we know that there's no medical issues associated with some of the physical things, we need to set them up for success. Now, based on their age, a few things shift and change. So when we're very young, so that 0 to 5, I'm going to say in a way it's kind of easier because they're still connected to the spirit world, particularly when they're exceptionally young. They don't have fear. It feels very normal because they go backwards and forwards to the spirit world when they sleep. So a lot of the things that creep in when they're older are not present when they're young. So as they get a little bit older, so we're talking when they're starting to interact with community more, so they're influenced by school, sporting groups, extended family. This is where we need to be, as parents, really open and understand ourselves what they're experiencing. So, because fear can show up for them, because they're going to be told in one way or another, often what they experience is wrong. They're not really experiencing it. It's made up, and even things like what I've, stop. Maybe they say they're diagnosed with something or labeled with a particular condition. There's a lot of things that happen when we let them into the world. So for parents, one, I'm going to say, be very open, assume nothing, trust what they say, and communicate. Your biggest blessing will be if your child trusts you to share everything with you. So no judgment. Because then they will, and then you'll be able to ascertain the way forward. Sleep gets impacted quite often, and that will impact school. It'll impact how they feel, their moods. So we need to set them up for success with sleep. And there's lots of ways that we can do that, because spirit, they can be a little bit annoying at bedtime. So we look at what works for sleep, how we distract spirit. We look at spirit boundaries, put some rules around it. We need to really understand exactly how spirit is interacting with our child. This is why the open communication is so important. With this additional information, then we can have the skills shared. So, I teach people then, okay, based on what's happening for your child, this is what we need to do. Based on how their sensitivities are presenting, this is the way forward. So every child is a little bit different, even though we have common factors where we go, okay, this is the skill set I need to give you. And it is about empowering the parents.
So are you working predominantly with the parents, or do the parents ever come in on these calls or in person with their child? Do you ever work with the child, like one-on-one, with the parent there? But what does it look like when you are working with these clients?
Initially, it'll be with the parents or the guardian, because we need to have some frank conversations without any fear of how we're describing it or what's going on. So initially, it'll be with the parent to see what's happening. And then I am very conscious about what the parent or the family want to achieve. And is everyone on board with this plan? Because if one parent really wants to support and nurture, and one parent or guardian does not believe what's happening, we have a separate conversation that needs to occur, or a separate thing that we need to consider.
I was just going to ask you that. What if you have a parent who just wants the child to shut down, and the other one wants to help the child understand that this is just part of the beautiful person that they are?
Well, we can't obviously change everyone's mind, but giving them the awareness of having that conversation, if they're open to that, on the awareness of making a child be something that they're not, the psychological impact of that, and the long-term impact of doing something like that, the mental well-being. Once they understand that, then they're a little bit more open, and they'll allow you to sort of step gently in. But we have to consider the family. Then it depends on the age of the child and what's happening. So whether we then work with the parent and child together. Because because teenagers are treated very differently to a 4-year-old. And what a teenager experiences is very different to, even an 11-year-old. So we then factor in the age of the child based on what we want the outcome to be.
And that was actually going to be my next question. So this is a great segue into that. Can you share a little bit about the difference between what a 4-year-old might be experiencing versus the 11-year-old versus the 14?
So the The 4-year-old will quite often, there's less fear. As a 4-year-old, they may be starting to have issues with their sleep. They may not, just depends how much community is impacting them. But they're generally going to feel comfortable because their spirit world still feels familiar. They may, if they're at preschool, teachers may be starting to notice that they're a little bit different. So you may have to deal with teachers and the teacher's perception or judgment around the way the child's interacting in the group, because sometimes they won't engage like other children do. They may appear distracted because they're engaging with spirit. That's what they're doing. So as they then move through, like 11-year-old or even into school, our social things will show up once again, because spirit is friendly, nice, kind, supportive. Peers are not always nice, kind, friendly, supportive.
True.
So we have to help them sometimes socially. Once again, teachers judging and not having full awareness. So I love working with teachers to explain what this looks like and how you can identify it. Keeping the child engaged. And if they're anything like my child, making sure the child doesn't misuse their connection with spirit. Mine worked out very young that he could cheat at school using spirit. So
no, really.
It's like, do not use them to tell you the math answers. That is not what they are there for. So because they're really inquisitive.
That's really funny.
Yes, it is. You try
very
not to
clever.
Laugh. Yeah, you try not to laugh. You still got to be, no, that's not appropriate. You need to show your math working, not just the answer. When we get into that middle school age group or junior school, we're seeing sort of community starting to influence them. We want them, because they can quite often close down to fit in. They know they don't fit in. They know they're different in that space. We have fears showing up then because of that, because they're not connected to the spirit world like they used to be when they were younger in regards to sleep time. It's not happening. They're not doing that. And so the vibration of spirit and energy feels a little bit different. So that can feel unnerving. They can also get very overwhelmed by large crowds, sounds, bright lights. There's a lot of things that can show up. So if they've got to go into like a big hall or something for an award ceremony, these type of things can be really challenging. So it's about equipping them with the skills that they need, or the techniques, so they can maneuver through school and all the social things that they have to do. And a teenager is it's a whole nother story. And this is why setting up the communication when they're very young is so important. Because with teenagers anyway, communication can be a challenge. Right. We need to know what they're doing. They need to be open in sharing their experiences. Anyone, we've got the online challenge where they'll go and they'll research things for themselves. They'll get information that might not be appropriate, might be wrong. They can be drawn to teachers or gurus that don't have their best interest at heart, and you may not be aware, or you may not know that so we've got to be really conscious about what they're exposed to as they grow. The other thing that's interesting that I noticed, that as our body changes, so the peaks of hormones that we go through, even when we're young, 11 years old, 15 years old, there's ties in with peaks in ability. So we're planning for these type of things, knowing that, okay, we're going to have a spurt of ability coming up. How do we maneuver through that? And if the child as a teenager is still not fully embracing who they are, we have to be aware of self-medicating so they don't experience the intensity of the energy at the level that they would if they weren't self-medicating, because that will dull it for them. And so once again, giving them the skills, the tips, so they don't need to do some of these behaviours and they can maneuver through it in a really healthy way.
Mhm. So I believe I saw on your website a video series, like an educational series that parents can purchase and watch. Is it like a self-taught course? I mean, a
Yes,
self-paced course?
that's
Would you
right.
talk a little bit about that? Because I think that would be really interesting to
So
people in my group.
within that course, so it's 10 videos, goes for 2 hours. So they're broken up into little segments. And I share the 3 archetypes that the children fall into, how to identify which archetype they fall into. And this is different to, you may have heard of Star Child and Star Seed, and it's different. This is in regards to identifying them, the physical signs, the behaviors, and it's based on age. So you know where they are and how you can support them based on the archetype they are growing through. And then it does cover how to support them for the challenges that show up so they can maneuver through life.
That sounds
And
like a
how
great
to,
course.
yeah, and how to really, because I truly believe that if we can support these young people and for them to understand that who they are is a blessing for everyone and themselves, and to accept who they are, that will change not only their community, but everyone that they encounter and everyone that encounters the people that they encountered. The ripple effect will be profound. And it's so important.
Absolutely. I so believe that 100%. I just want to mention to anybody who is watching us live right now, if you have any questions for Bronwyn, you can go ahead and type them in the chat. I mean, not in the chat, in the comment section on Facebook, and I would be happy to ask those questions for you. So let's talk about how parents can reach you if they would like to set up a consult with you. Talk a little bit about what it's like to connect with you, how they do it, and um, yeah, whatever feels comfortable there.
So my website is Bronwyn Jane Medium, and I operate in sort of Zoom. So I can work with anyone, doesn't matter where we are. We work multiple time zones. I spend a lot of time in the American time zone. So even though I'm in Australia, I spend a lot of time in America, just virtually. So we connect through Zoom in very much a conversational style like this. And so we have that offering where it's live, we go through bespoke, whatever is you're experiencing. So in a coaching session that way. There is the video course as well on the website. And I've got all the socials, all those kind of things. But location is not a barrier. So it doesn't matter where you are. If you feel drawn to me, if you feel that I could help you, your child in any way, don't think that because I'm in Australia that that's not possible, because it
Great.
definitely is.
Okay. And we'll be posting all of your contact information in the comment section once the video has processed and is actually set in the Facebook community.
I will be sharing in that link. There is a free ebook that'll be part of that share, and I'd encourage everyone to download it because it'll give you some really great tips on how to support your child, what they'll experience, exercises that you can use. So I would encourage everyone to download that.
That's wonderful. You've really brought some great information to this Dancing Jaguar community about working with really sensitive psychic children and how to identify when you have a psychic child. And then, you just have such a great support system for parents to be able to come to you for support as their child is going through the various stages of childhood. So, I think this is really a match made in heaven because so many of the children in the Dancing Jaguar community are very sensitive. So I think this is a really beautiful way for me to bring somebody who is an expert in supporting parents and children this
The other
way.
thing that I'd like
Go
to
ahead.
mention too, sorry for cutting you off. I know from my experience, one of the best things that I did was for me to gather knowledge as a parent. So I understood what seeing spirit was like, what hearing spirit was like, what going to a mall felt like, why it felt so much. So I would also recommend, suggest that if you have a child that you think is psychic, gather knowledge for yourself, understand for yourself exactly what they're experiencing. You may have experienced this yourself when you were younger, and as you go along this journey of understanding, you'll be like, that's kind of familiar for me. I do remember that. What I notice too, as I work with children, is that often it is in the family, and we may or may not be aware that it is. We may have repressed it ourselves. And through this journey, quite often a lot of things are sparked for the parents. And that's an additional blessing for, I'm going to say, the collective, that as we support our children, we also connect back to who we are. And that's a lovely gift. And so I also spend a lot of time helping people do that.
Oh, that's beautiful. So is there anything that you would like to leave our community with as we wind down?
I guess the biggest takeaways through my experience with working with psychic children is treat it normal. Don't judge. Have open communication with them. And they are not entertainment for extended family or friends. And make them feel safe and secure in who they are.
Beautiful, and that's very powerful too. Well, thank you for being here with us in this community, Bronwyn. It's really a pleasure to meet you and to have you as a resource for parents and others in this community. So thank you for being here.
My
And
pleasure.
everyone, go ahead and look for all of her contact information in the spaces below the video.
Bye.